Okay, let's unpack this. Imagine waking up to news that doesn't just tweak how a few people use the internet, but, well, fundamentally redefines it for 1.4 billion people and sends, serious tremors through Silicon Valley. That's not some future scenario. It's actually happening right now. So this deep dive is all about Africa's really bold move to build its own internet infrastructure, basically from the ground up. We're going to explore why they did it, how they pulled it off, and the massive implications this has for digital sovereignty, the big tech giants, and, yeah, ultimately for you.
It really does reframe things, doesn't it? Because what's often missed, or maybe just ignored, is that the idea of this truly global, equal internet access, it was largely perception. A nice idea, maybe, but the reality, especially across Africa, was, well, quite different. And this new development, it directly challenges that whole old way of thinking. It forces us to look again at digital access, digital power.
Absolutely. We'll start by peeling back the layers on how the internet really worked for many places, the kind of systemic problems this setup created for Africa specifically, and then we'll pivot to the solutions they've built. And these are seriously groundbreaking solutions. We're talking physical infrastructure like cables and data centers, but also entirely new digital languages. And trust me, the ripple effects here are, well, they're astounding, much bigger than just getting faster Wi-Fi. So let's talk about how things were. That narrative of the global internet, how it often hid a, let's say, less equal reality. The common idea is it's this borderless space, right? Free for all. But our sources paint a different picture, more like a gated playground. And the gatekeepers.
Yeah.
Handful of Western tech giants, you know the names, Google, Amazon, Microsoft.
That gated playground metaphor is spot on. It really highlights this hidden power dynamic. For 2 decades, these companies weren't just service providers. They were more like landlords. And Africa was the tenant, essentially paying rent for every click, every byte, every single digital move. It wasn't just about getting a service. No, it was fundamentally about external control. Control over their digital pathways, the flow of their own information. What that really showed was how this supposedly free global internet could actually, maybe inadvertently, create a kind of digital dependency, almost colonialism. It wasn't just the cost of access. It was about having your data, your innovation potential, even your digital future shaped by outside forces. That really undermines self-determination.
And this system, as our sources really dig into, it created some huge roadblocks for Africa. Basically, 3 major chokeholds holding back digital progress and, economic growth. First, let's talk cost. It sounds weird, but Africans often paid some of the highest prices for internet anywhere. Why? Well, because they were effectively paying rent on someone else's infrastructure pipes laid across oceans, servers far away, plus all the transit fees and markups along the way.
And that cost issue ties directly into the second chokehold: speed and reliability. It's kind of mind-boggling when you think about it. The analysis shows that a simple search, say, from Lagos in Nigeria, might not just go to a local server.
Oh,
Oh, no.
wow.
That data packet often had to travel thousands of miles, bouncing off undersea cables to servers in Europe, maybe even North America, before finally making the long trip back to Africa.
Wow, like mailing a letter to your neighbor by shipping it overseas first.
Exactly. This ridiculous scenic route meant massive delays, latency. It made the internet slow, unreliable, laggy. And think about that. It fundamentally hobbled locally developed apps, put African businesses at a real disadvantage online. It wasn't just annoying, it was a systemic drag on performance.
Yeah, and beyond the sheer frustration of cost and speed, there was something deeper touching on, national autonomy. That's the third chokehold. Control and surveillance. Every message, email, search query, basically all the data flowing within and out of the continent had to pass through these Western-controlled networks, which gave these outside companies just unprecedented visibility and, frankly, oversight into African digital life. It really makes you stop and think, what does digital autonomy even mean if your entire online existence is routed through a foreign gatekeeper?
Oh, it was very tangible. Our sources point to lots of examples: sensitive government communications, business data, critical public service info, all flowing through servers located abroad. This wasn't just a theoretical risk. It created real hesitation for local innovation, undermined trust in digital systems. It became crystal clear that you couldn't have true digital sovereignty without owning the actual wires and the rules of the road, the protocols.
Okay, so that era, those chokeholds, the hidden costs, the lack of control, it just ended. Because Africa didn't just sit back and complain. They asked, what if, instead of just patching things up, we built something entirely new? And that's exactly what they did. They launched the Continental Internet Exchange, the CIX. This signals a definitive end to that old system. And this isn't just another ISP, Our research calls it a parallel internet infrastructure, a clean break. It's a huge shift in the global digital power balance.
It absolutely is. Think of it like this. Imagine Africa deciding, okay, instead of paying crazy tolls on these foreign-owned roads that aren't even great for our local traffic, we're going to build our own continent-wide superhighway system. That's pretty much what's happened here, only it's fiber optics instead of asphalt. And the digital fees. They now stay in Africa, funding local growth, not flowing out. The goal here, the prize, is really total freedom, self-determination over their own digital economy.
And the CIX, it just rewrites the rule book for how data moves. Instead of African traffic bouncing around the globe through Western hubs, African data now stays within Africa. It's an internal network designed by Africans specifically for African needs.
Yes, and this isn't just a blueprint. It's real. It's vast. We're talking a whole new network, state-of-the-art data centers, thousands upon thousands of kilometers of fiber optic cables, and exchange points strategically placed right across 54 nations. This makes sure that traffic between, say, Kenya and South Africa, it stays local, homegrown. So if someone in Nairobi searches a site hosted down in Johannesburg, that data never has to leave the continent. That is a fundamental, monumental change in how information flows and where its value stays.
And the sheer scale of it, it's hard to grasp. This isn't a small upgrade. We're talking over 100,000 kilometers of new fiber laid, 47 mega data centers built from scratch, internet exchange points in every major African city. Our sources really emphasize that this infrastructure build, it genuinely rivals what Silicon Valley built over decades. It's a complete, deliberate digital transformation. But here's where it gets even more interesting, maybe the most revolutionary part. The real power isn't just the hardware, the cables and boxes, it's the software. It runs on a brand new system, a new protocol called the African Digital Protocol, or ADP.
Right. And what's truly radical here is how the ADP works. It basically changes how data packets are built and sent. Think of the standard Western protocols like TCP/IP as being like, say, English. Widely understood, sure, but maybe designed with certain assumptions baked in. The ADP, it's like creating a new, highly efficient language, maybe like Swahili adapted for the internet, designed from the ground up. It prioritizes local connections, data sovereignty, making sure relevant content surfaces first, and crucially, it's incompatible with those Western protocols by design. That's not a bug, it's a feature.
Incompatible. Wow.
Yeah, it means external systems can't just plug in easily or dictate how things work. Western apps might feel clunky or just not work properly without specific adaptation. Africa has, in effect, built its own digital language, one that works best in its own environment.
And this hits right at the core of Google's power, doesn't it? For 20 years, their dominance wasn't just the search algorithm. It was owning the underlying infrastructure and the rules of the protocols for finding information. But the ADP just completely flips that table. Instead of Google's centralized indexing, where their algorithm decides what you see, it uses something different called distributed knowledge mapping.
That's a really key point. This new system doesn't just optimize for raw speed, although it's fast locally. It fundamentally prioritizes African content, African languages, African perspectives. So for example, if you search for African history using Google, you might get results dominated by Western viewpoints, often in English. But search on this new African internet, using this distributed mapping, you get results curated from a network of trusted local sources. African universities, researchers, community knowledge bases. The results are intrinsically more relevant. They're in local languages. They have the right cultural context. It really makes you question how information gets shaped globally and who decides what's important.
It might sound like a subtle tech difference, but for Google, our sources literally describe it as a terrifying existential threat. This isn't just losing some market share. It's a challenge to their entire global setup, which assumes everyone uses their preferred protocols. The ADP proves another way is possible, maybe even better for certain regions. It questions that whole one internet fits all idea. If 1.4 billion people find a search system that actually serves them better, that's not just a dent in Google's market. It's potentially an empire starting to crumble.
And if we zoom out, look at the bigger picture, it's not just search they've rebuilt. The CIX, running on ADP, has fostered African alternatives for pretty much everything. Email, cloud storage, video streaming, e-commerce platforms, even complex ad networks. Basically, for every key service Google offers, there's now likely a faster, cheaper, and more culturally relevant African alternative available within this new ecosystem. It's about building a complete sovereign digital world.
And the money involved here is just staggering. Economically, this is huge. Right now, estimates suggest Africans spend something like $50 billion a year on Western digital services. $50 billion. That's a massive outflow of capital straight from the continent into Silicon Valley coffers every single year.
But now, That $50 billion, or a huge chunk of it, stays in Africa. It pays African engineers, builds African data centers, fuels African tech startups. Every dollar can recirculate locally, multiplying its economic impact, driving innovation and self-reliance instead of draining resources. It's a shift towards real economic independence.
And the timing here feels deliberate, really critical. Africa's the youngest continent, right? Over 60% of the population is under 25. These are digital natives. They grew up online, but were stuck using systems not really built for them, not for their languages, their culture, their infrastructure realities.
Exactly. And now, for the first time, they're getting tools in their own languages, designed for their specific needs, running on infrastructure on their own soil. This combination, Deuxian design plus better performance, it's leading to adoption rates that are just off the charts. The numbers are staggering, honestly. Over 200 million Africans reportedly switched to using CIX sub services in just the first 3 days after the full launch.
Wow, 3 days.
3 days. That's faster uptake than Facebook, Instagram, or TikTok ever saw.
Yep.
Ever. And why? The sources are pretty clear. For Africans, it simply works better. It's faster for them, it's more affordable, and it feels like it belongs to them.
So the big question then, what does this mean for the global tech giants, especially Google? Our sources suggest they are, understandably, in panic mode, but they're kind of stuck. They can't just buy the CIX. It's a continent-wide thing, not just one company. And they can't easily copy it either. Sure, the ADP protocol is open source, but it's designed to run best almost exclusively inside Africa's own parallel network.
For Google to actually compete head-on, realistically, they'd have to build their own separate Africa-optimized internet from the ground up, mirroring the CIX investment. We're talking hundreds of billions of dollars, and decades of work, probably. That's a cost and a time frame that just seems impossible for a single company, even Google. It really raises fascinating questions about competition, doesn't it? Can a dominant global player even be challenged when the competitor doesn't just play the same game better, but actually builds a whole new playing field?
And while Google tries to figure out its next move, you can bet other regions are watching this very, very closely. Emerging economies in Asia and South America, maybe even established players in Europe are looking at this. The question isn't anymore, can Africa pull this off? Clearly they have. And it's working spectacularly.
The real question now, the one for all of us to think about is, what happens next? What happens when other parts of the world start seriously thinking about their own digital independence following Africa's lead? What could that mean for this idea of a single global internet that we've known? Does that model even hold? And how might this fragmentation, or maybe diversification, reshape the digital world for everyone, including you, in the coming years? It feels like we're at the start of something truly transformative.